It's a provocation. So I'm interested to know whether that's how it was read, as a provocation or as a, you know, sign, sealed and deliver, Charlotte's a feminist and she hates men and all that sort of stuff, or whether it's more like, here's the gauntlet, what are we going to do about it? So I'm interested to know if there's a response to that question, actually. Yeah, I'm sorry. You're chairing.
That's all right.
Chairing these things.
Okay.
Would you like the mic?
And then.
Yeah.
I think the point about Charlotte as a feminist is a good one. So often I feel maybe the population think that feminists hate men, but I think your piece was the opposite of misandry, because it's allowing men to be exactly who they are, not putting any sort of stereotypes on them, just allowing them to be what they feel. And I would say that the piece is feminist, but in a way that loves men, not in a way that hates men.
Wow, that's really...
Yeah, for me, the world and the tone that you were setting.
It's alright, don't worry about that, honestly.
Sorry,
Just say loudly.
the world and the tone that you were kind of setting did have that undulating feel of, reflecting the vibration and sharing those kind of things. But I don't think it was, for me anyway, I didn't receive a bold
Statement.
obnoxious statement. It was more, which was really, really nice, the kind of, the offerings, I received that really, really nicely.
Great, thank you. That's
Anything else?
Can I just tell you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry,
I think it was spot on certain themes, so it was really, it was quite nice to see how through either the speech or the movement you were expressing.
I don't think they can hear you at
Oh.
all, sorry.
Okay. I think it was spot on how some of the themes were presented, and so you could, it made sense to me, and how the narrative and the movement were combined, and in a way I also enjoyed the quick succession of themes, because you were changing themes quite quickly, but that is okay. Because you kind of like get to visit a lot of things. But the other thing I want to say, as I was watching it, I felt that you were actually saying, actually it's okay not to be an alpha male. It's okay not to be, the man that everyone, or not to be the, the provider, the hard one, all that. So, yes, thank you.
There's a lady.
I thought that, I have to say thank you so much. That was the most wonderful interview. It was amazing. Do I need a mic? I'm quite loud. I just wanted to say that people always say, oh, well, you didn't get everything in there, and you didn't have this, you didn't have that. But I thought there were some moments in there which would never have occurred to me. As a woman, you're so used to seeing female stereotypes. You just see it all the time. You've grown up with it, live with it, and you rarely see the male stereotypes. But some of them that you chose tonight, that you chose to perform, I thought that the warfare scenes, I've had so much sympathy for the first time ever of men at war, thinking about what they're put through. I mean, it's, the cliche of Hollywood movies and those war scenes, and the music was, Catherine Bigelow. I mean, the whole thing was so accurate. And then the boy band. I mean, just that moment, which took me out of the piece. I went, that's such a, of course, it's something that we don't even consider as being something that men are portrayed as this kind of perfect image. I thought the contrast was extraordinary, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry. I'm not from the arts world or from the dance world. In fact, my friend Lou invited me here, so this is my first ever show like this. So sorry if I don't oh, I'm not the only one. Yes.
Please come back.
Not everything you see at the place
but one thing I can say in terms of feelings that hit me was this really the reason why I said gritty, and another thing that came was raw, is I didn't feel you gave an exact conclusion to the story of, okay, this is the answer to it, or they are terrible. It really did expose the more vulnerable side of them for me, And there was even parts where I felt guilty for laughing at it, like for instance the masturbation thing. I was like, haha. But actually it actually did expose there is a massive problem to that, and there is emotional side to even things like that we would consider are hilarious. And the background I come from a family who are very old school. The men are alpha, the women are feminine. So it really spoke to me to see this kind of other side of, especially when the guy was fighting. But on the other side, he was very feminine, and he wanted to be dressed up as a lady. So that really, really kind of spoke to me, because my brothers never talk about their feelings and all that. So it makes me think, what is hiding behind that? So it really, really spoke to me in that sense of there is another side, and they constantly hide it, and it really, really is one of the biggest problems, is that you're expected to hide your feelings, to hold that feelings down. I really think it showed that. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
Hi. When you said that about hiding, I'm recognizing more and more as a woman that's, I'm a grandmother, but I'm seeing how much toxicity there is in my family, and it breaks my heart, but it also feels wonderful to say that and to let it out. Because there's so much hurt. It's like the soul is crying to be recognized as the heart and the soul and those vital places inside us. We want to confess, or we want to let people know that we hurt, all women, mothers, sisters, all of us, as well as these brave guys. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Any men out there want to share in this discussion? It's about us, guys. Come on. Please. Thank you, Chris. Oh, by the way, Chris was in the show. I don't know if you...
Should I join you?
No, you don't have to do that. But if you could just share with us what you felt about the piece, maybe.
Okay, so to break it down, there was a certain song in there called Who Am I to You? And when I basically wrote that, and the ending of it goes, my emotions do not make me any less of a man. What that was basically trying to portray was the fact that, to the men that aren't exactly masculine or alpha male, like what I wanted to basically, break down the idea of was that people like me that are very, in my feelings and, I'm very aware of how I feel on a day-to-day basis, like I wanted to bring that emotional depth into light, and dark places, literally having, the perspectives of like being the alpha male, literally the person in the middle that can actually see both sides of the coin, and then the chorus of, the song that you heard that was coming off Marcus's phone. Great remix, by the way. What basically inspired me to literally, make the music for such a prestigious, soundtrack and production was the fact that, as a man, I think it's very, very rare that, people like me actually speak about things that we've actually been through in our lives, childhood trauma, being bullied in school, and what, Charlotte did, and, we actually had an interview about this as well, which, I'll pretty much say that now. It was a great interview, by the way. She's great. But what she actually did was actually like help me break down what it means to be a male, but not from a stereotypical angle of like, you're meant to be the rude boy or whatever, but like it gave me a chance to literally air out everything that I've been feeling and thinking about over the years, literally digging really deep into the belly of the beast and actually like talking about things that men wouldn't really, talk about. Like,
For example,
that was great. For example, like, being bullied at school. Bullying has such a tremendous effect on a human being, whether that be male or female. Like, I've had it done to me before, and, it pretty much gave me the mentality of like, for a while anyway, that, I couldn't really come to anyone about it, because, you know what they say, snitches get stitches, but that's BS, but like, it pretty much made me, terrified for a while to actually be true to myself, because, back in... Thank you.
But apart from the last piece, apparently.
Can I just ask, how did that work? How could you have written the rap without knowing what was going on? How did that work as a process? Because you can't have written your words. How did it all?
No, he didn't write Rob's words. They were sort of cobbled together by a devising process. So I should just give a big up to Audio Active, really, which is an organisation in Brighton who work with a real range of young people. Adam Julia, who's the chief executive.
Put your hand up, Adam.
You can say this better than me, but there's a lot of roots into Audio Active, but they run rap sessions with a guy called Tom Hines, who's a sort of youth worker and a very great rapper. And so there's a bunch of different lads, probably aged, between 15 and 25?
12,
Yeah.
20,
That go to regular rap sessions. And so I'd heard of the great work they do. We were trying to make a piece about young men, so I talked to Adam about could I sit in on a couple of rap sessions, and then sort of identified a few people that I might want to work with who could feed into the work. And Chris being one of them, who spoke earlier, and a couple of others. And we started in the studio with some of their pieces that we'd just literally grabbed on a recorder in Brighton Youth Centre and then I started sending little fragments to Jules Maxwell, who has composed this piece, who lives in France, and then he'd started to put underscores under things and sort of building tracks, and then I brought them back in. And then in the meantime, Adam and Tom suggested that Evan would be a really good person to work with, because he is extraordinarily good at taking a brief and turning it into what you heard this evening. And he does it quickly, he does it instinctively. So I basically set him a brief via email, and then this amazing stuff came through, and I took it into the studio, and Janusz actually, who's here, translated all three of the pieces that he sent us, and then we underscored them and composed them. And so Janusz had an interesting job of translating his words. His words came from an idea, conceptual push, if you like, from me. But he's a poet, and he's amazing.
He's young, right?
And he's 15.
15, oh, wow.
So, and this is the kind of work that Audio Active allow young men and women to find their voice. And so we had lots of discussions about whether Evan could come in at such a late stage in our process to be a live presence, because we were all a bit scared about how that might actually work. And there's still things to sort out, but I think as someone coming into quite a weird context, he did brilliantly, first of all. He stepped up. And he always does, apparently. And his future is really bright. And he's an A+ student, do you know what I mean? He's really cool. And nothing really phases him, apart from he forgot to come on tonight, which was a bit of a problem, but we won't talk about that. So well done, Janusz, for covering that one. But so basically, he's a poet, and he wanted to contribute, and as did Marcus and James, and Chris, and various other young men that we work with. So although not all of them ended up on stage, I feel their presence, I feel the interview that Chris was talking about is in the work. The darker stuff that Chris unfortunately has experienced is in there. So it's an active translation what we're doing, really. And I think that's what metaphor, what dance is good at. Someone said it earlier, like the abstract can be very meaningful. The abstract doesn't have to be meaningless. And I have to say, I see a lot of dance work that leaves me completely cold because it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't carry stories of any type. It doesn't, we were talking about diversity earlier, in inverted commas. It doesn't include young people. It's a white middle class preoccupation, hence that text about that. So it's like, how do we get other voices into the mix? One way is what I'm doing, another way is what you're doing, and there's lots of other ways to get, a range of voices into one. And that's what I'm trying to do in a way. And it's not very often you see in this country a 17-year-old and two 15-year-olds in a professional dance piece.
What I really appreciated was the mix of styles that you used, and also a lot of quote unquote street dance styles and references in the piece. Is this something that you normally do?
No.
Oh really? Why not? Why wouldn't you? Is this the first time you've done hip hop?
Yes, totally. But that's
why?
Because I suppose it's not the language that I've used. It's not something I'm particularly familiar with, in the same way that I'm not particularly familiar with ballet, for example. Or Latin. No, I'm really not. I'm not a trained dancer. I never was. I fell into dance via trapeze, so I've got a very weird kind of route into it, which is why, when we were talking earlier, we were kind of going, why don't people call the misogyny in ballet as much as they call it in hip-hop, say? Good question. I call it all the time because I jabber on about gender politics all the time, but Janusz and I have had lots of conversations about how brutal ballet can be for women and for men, actually. So that's a whole other conversation. But I suppose for me, I was through the rapping idea. We thought, wouldn't it be great to work with Marcus and James, who came to a couple of sessions. Marcus came to an audition, and James did as well. And then we ran some sessions at Brighton Youth Centre with a couple of hip-hop artists from Brighton who taught those sessions with South East Dance's support. And actually, hope you don't mind me saying, James, but James came to the audition and I didn't offer him a job. And then he came to one of the sessions, and because it wasn't a stupid audition, he was flying. So I was like, come on in. So it's been a really weird sort of process, because I don't really audition people, but I knew I needed some men, and some of the young men that are involved with Audio Active are really put off by the idea of dance, not surprisingly. And some embraced it, but James turned up and it's like, gosh, you can really dance, let's just bring you into the fold. He's only 17, Marcus was 14 when he started with this, he just turned 15. And I just wanted to say that some of, say, Marcus's other influences, like rugby, he's a karate teacher as well as a karate practitioner, some of those things kind of ended up in the show as well. So you sort of take what's in the room in a way. Do you want to say anything, guys?
Yeah.
I'm talking for you. Marcus, what's it been like for you, mate? Yeah.
Well, when I first started.
Put it near your mouth.
When I first like joined on, it was like, it was really strange for me because it was a lot different to what I, well, not expected, but different to what I've like known in terms of when it comes to like dance. Obviously, I've been mainly street when it's come to like my dancing in like recent years. So when it came to like all this contemporary, I was like, whoa, what's going on with the acting? But over time, like through doing this as well, it's really like opened up my like, I guess like dance kind of like in me, because I felt like when we did, as the time went on, I felt a bit more comfortable, and then after breaking walls of, oh, this isn't as embarrassing as it seems, then I can really like put more feeling and emotion and really like kind of think about what the dance means, or if I'm acting, like what does it mean, what am I showing to people watching. And so yeah, so like generally over time this is like kind of, and then I can get a better idea of what message we're trying to get across and how we're trying to tell it and what stories we're trying to tell and who's around me, and yeah.
And what did you make of Evan's contribution?
Oh, Evan's just amazing. Like his poetry is like ridiculously good, and his contribution, I think, especially like having him live as well, really like upped the energy that we had, and it made us like almost like push the meaning, like made it more clearer for people to see, and like yeah, it just felt like his contribution, because his writing is like really good, and so it kind of brought a different atmosphere to our dances, and yeah, it gave us like someone to talk through, I suppose.
Great. James, you want to say anything?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for me it was similar to Marcus, and I'm going to echo what he said, but when I came into the performance, it was really interesting because coming from street also, it's very much of learn this routine, perform this routine, do a competition. And to be in a show that's the creative side, not just the performing side, was really interesting. And initially, it was really difficult to try and actually get into that and realise that I'm not just showing something, I've actually got to create something that represents what I'm feeling. And that was really strange, and especially because it wasn't all street, and there was contemporary elements, which I've done a little bit of, but having that whole new language of dance and actually devising pieces and being involved in the whole creative process was really interesting for me, and I've really enjoyed the whole thing, because same as Marcus, I feel like it's really opened up my eyes to what's possible and how you can represent different things, and I've really enjoyed it. I've loved the whole process, really. Yeah.
Thank you. I share your story, guys. Yeah, because as a hip hop dancer, and when I wanted to do my hip hop, like we're talking like a while back now, but when I wanted to do my hip hop in a theatrical context, there was no context for it whatsoever. So it's just really good to hear from you guys as hip hoppers who've come in this street to see how the contemporary dance world is good for us. Do you know what I mean? I just want to say, I've noticed you do a little high-heeled six-step. Tell me about your experiences.
Well, before I started my contemporary training, I had a little bit of breakdance training.
Where did you train?
It was like a youth, it's how I started dancing when I was 17. It was like a youth theatre. And we did all kinds, it was mixed ability, so it was really interesting. But yeah, lots of urban, hip hop, breakdance, all the different elements. And then I'm interested in voguing as well, so that became part of it, just naturally, I guess. Yeah, and it was just, it was a really funny idea to me to have to breakdance on heels. I just thought, it's a gag. Hopefully people enjoy it. It's like, you think I'm gonna go into some femme stuff, but then suddenly it's a six-step, and then my version of a six-step. And then, yeah, just to, I guess, kind of, yeah, make people laugh and mess with the form and the expectation you have of when, yeah. And then mess with it again when I come up and I'm like, voguing the house down. Yeah. So that was really fun, to use all those elements together.
You look so happy up there, Jake.
Thanks, Mom. This is my mom.
Mom's in there.
Yeah, that was the challenge. Actually, was to combine both the masculine and the feminine in the same theatrical performance. Like, so you do it. There's an easy way to do it with extremes, like theatrically you understand when I'm being masculine, and then when I'm being feminine, it's really easy to read. But then how, as one person, do you have all those elements in the same body and then just perform it as neutral? And actually theatrically that's really hard to do, and that was one of the biggest challenges for me in the process.
Are we talking about the moment where you was wearing the white top and the black shorts?
Yeah, actually, that was yeah, that wasn't really anything. It was pulling on things, and with the text, it was about being all those things, but at the same time not. So all those things, but not. And yeah, it was such a grey area that to try and communicate that, it's actually really hard. But yeah, it was what it was. Well, thank you. Yeah.
You did. I think that's the reason why I asked about that particular moment, because I felt that was the moment that was what was being expressed.
Yeah, and I think there's just something about a male body can hold all of those things at the same time.
Exactly.
And you know, Jake has a life outside of being a contemporary dancer that is exploring those things. As many of us have lives that aren't the ones that you see on the stage. So it's what you're willing as a performer to bring into the devising space.
Okay, I was just about to say, can we have 2 more questions before we call it a day? Here's one.
I guess my interest and curiosity, and I don't know if it's a formulated question, is a bit around that, because I feel there's this immense generosity from the whole creative team, so I want to say thank you, from different roles within that whole apparatus that's making the show. But I guess being a performer, I'm interested in what you as people on stage are bringing every night. And there's something about the piece, and it feels like it's a project, it's a bit like a forum for many questions reliving those things like every night. You're like in the underbelly of the beast every night. And even if they are thematic, you are like living in the gut of what you're bringing in. So
Well, yes and no. I have to stop you and just say that part of, I think, being a versatile and good performer is being able to manage that emotional investment, know where it sits, and deliver it without expending yourself.
Yeah.
Because what's not useful is for people to bring that and not be able to manage it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that because my work always calls on that emotional, what do you call it, sort of you know, investment, if you like.
Yeah.
And I think for some of the people in the cast, that's easier than others because they've been doing it. Like Janusz has worked with me and other people for like 15 years, so he knows how to manage that. I think other members of the cast struggle more with that because it's a big ask. So I just want to clarify that part of performing in my funny little world is being able to turn it on and turn it off and be safe with that. So yes, you might invest through the devising process. It might be, as Rob said, messy and difficult and challenging. And what the fuck are you talking about, Charlotte? And I don't want to do that. And how do I do that? And that's crap. And that's all fine. I can hold the space for that. When it comes to performance, you need to know when to invest and when to return to you, and know how much you're willing to give, I suppose.
I guess that's what my curiosity is around.
Yeah.
Is that like, is there a space for that caretaking as you go on tour? Is there a deeper? Because it's like, even if you manage that, the body that's being, I mean, I empathize with the body that's like in the.
I'd say it's part of the job for you to self-manage it. That's my point. Yes, of course, we talk to each other, and there's, you know, if there's a problem, I'll address it as much as I can. I mean, we're not going on tour now. We're making this into a film thing, and then we might tour next year. But I mean, this is kind of 2 nights only. Get it out there, and then film the material as from next Monday, and make a film installation out of it. Because I'm experimenting with what form to distribute my work, our work on with. So we're sort of not just doing the middle scale touring that we used to do. Although I think this piece probably, now I know what it is, deserves some more outings.
Can I ask that question, guys? Don't you think this should be on tour?
Yeah,
definitely.
There's a lot of
Definitely.
It's a really
that's good. That's fine. My administrative director is over there, so Jude is not. But you know, you never know. Do you? Anyway, did you have a? So does that sort of wasn't really a question, but.
I guess it was pondering around: is there space in a project like this for the live experience of the performers?
Well, they're experiencing it, so I would say yes. And I can pretty easily spot if there's something going on dynamically within the group that's not healthy, and I'll try and address that, like from a psychological point of view, but I'm not a psychotherapist. And I'll also clock if something isn't functioning. But I think it's fair to say that these guys have been incredibly generous with their bodies, their thoughts, their willingness to go with my suggestions. You know, it takes quite a lot for a man who's 20. How old are you now?
24.
I mean, he's, you know, these are, Janusz and Rob are older, they've worked with me for a long time. Jack and Jake are new to me, I've never worked with them. I think they're brilliant. And they've kind of, it's been a bit of a struggle at times, but and I think it's been a bit of a weird process, but it's like, now they're inundated. And now they've been initiated, not inundated, initiated. They're also inundated.
I'm sure they've been
but you know, there's something about a trial by fire, and I don't think it's an easy trial working with me, because you're in, there is that emotional investment, that personal investment, the political channeling of whatever's being brought into the room, but also there's dance. But I don't think anyone joins the company thinking that dance is going to just be dance in my.
I think it's just, if I can add something, it's just to stay sane, and there's still your life you have to deal with after working hours. I'm living with, I've been living with Jake and Jack together for the last couple of weeks, 6, 7 or 8, I can't remember now, but you know,
just like the therapist.
It's, I mean, yes, we do talk about work after work. We do get angry, we do get anxious, because things happen in the studio that, you know, you might be happy, you might be unhappy about, so you kind of discuss those things. But then there is always Rick and Morty on Netflix, and there is always Stranger Things. You kind of put your mind into something else because you need it just to stay really healthy and sane. Otherwise, you know, you can't live your life only for the art, because it's just like too much. To be honest, I mean, I'm speaking for myself here. I don't know about these guys.
And I'd like to just throw something in the mix as well. There's also the thing about doing art that doesn't anything. Yeah, and I worry that there's a very vacant space sometimes in the artist world. I don't know if anybody's had to do commercial work where you've got to do the same every day, do you know what I mean? That can kill and destroy your soul as well, do you know what I mean? And I just think that there has to be something said for this type of context that for me is attractive, because we're getting under the skin of who we are as human beings. And yes, it's scary sometimes, but I think it's a good thing to do. So I just wanted to just say that as well as that. And we have our final comment of the evening.
Comment or question?
Question, comment?
I was just thinking about what you were saying actually, and I was just going to ask a question on this for the people who act especially as well. It's one thing to obviously manage those going, this is me acting, this is me now. But through your experience and through the years you go through as well, do you ever feel like you're actually becoming a blank slate, ready to be, that's not rude, is it?
No, that's a brilliant
becoming
question.
A blank slate, ready to be used in different areas. So for instance, this is you now, okay, cool. You get onto stage, you're now this character, which is obviously makes it easier to change between the two, but do you ever feel your character itself becomes something that you could just switch after a while and you don't have, because obviously our characters are made by our experiences, so if you constantly have experience where you can get rid of all the emotions in that time, do you ever feel you as a person then suddenly lose that kind of stubbornness of this is my stuck character? Do you ever feel you can just rearrange now?
I think a lot of dance theatre choreographers, if you come as a blank slate, if you come in the studio and you want to be directed, or you have no baggage, or you have no ideas, then you can't. There's nothing to pull on, because it's much more when you perform. It's much more you, if it's you in there, you know, and you've made stuff. Your material is your stuff. And it's
presumably more satisfying because it is.
Yeah, you get to perform yourself.
You.
Rather than something, a character or a role that's been put on you, and then you do it and you have this distance, and it's and you do it well, but it's not you, so it's kind of like take it or leave it. Whereas
I mean, I think, can I just interject and say, I think any performance is not you. It's you, but it's not you. And there's a spectrum of how much of you is in there. So for example, Jax Paul thing came from a book called Manhood that I read, which is lots of pictures of dicks and stories that go with those dicks. And it's a really interesting book. And I'd never torn a book up in my life, but I didn't have a photocopier at the time, so I gave, Jake had one. Yours was about someone that was in transition. Jax was about someone a 20-year-old man who'd been addicted to porn. So his story, if you want to call it that, in the show is not your story necessarily. He might relate to it, and I'll talk for you, but we all might relate to it in different, there are porn users in the company. I personally as a feminist don't agree with porn at all. There are porn users in this male company, and I have to just put a lid on my feelings about that and deal with the fact that there's a story that needs to be told about the use of porn. I know everybody, loads of people use it, loads of people are happy with using it. So it's sort of, you kind of meet the stories and meet your own thoughts and politics halfway. So it's half conceptual, let's have a play with this idea, here's a story, or here's a thought, or here's a compositional construct, can you play within that? And as Jake said, the other bit of it is then bringing themselves or their responses, or their physical responses, their emotional responses to that, and then I can pretty quickly see if something's got legs or not. And there's, to go back to the question about what's lost in the process, fucking loads. Because, I think someone else had a story that we didn't use, a story, narrative. There's loads of stuff that I'll bring in. Rob and I had a real problem kind of editing down the text and not be so preachy, not be so didactic, not trying to solve any problems. I still think it's right on the edge of, is there too much in there? But because we're playing with his uncertain delivery of it, we kind of get away with it, I think.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to say it's not black and white, it is sketchy. I've got nothing to say about masculinity, really. You fucking solve it. There's a bit of it that kind of goes, come on, men, and that's what Evan's final thing, which actually Rob and I wrote, he didn't write the last one, of kind of like, stand up and be candid, stand up and do something, just pass the baton on. What do you want to do? Because do you know what, as a feminist, I'm really bloody tired. I've been banging on about this shit for 30 years.
Wow.
I really have, in my work and in my practice and as a woman and as the way I live. So there's something about how do you stimulate action in the younger generation? And I think maybe their role models need to be male in some respects, or they need to have really healthy role models. And that's what's exciting about working with a company, if you like, where there's 2 men in their 30s, late 30s, and 2 men, these guys in their 20s, and then 2 men in their 3 men in their teenage years. It's like you get the spectrum and you realise how little has changed and how much possibility there is. And that's a real tension, how little has changed since I was a teenager and I was in my 20s with my shaved head and my DMs trying to fight for change. And I'm 50 next year and I'm still saying the same things. It's so disappointing. Oh. No, I mean, I don't want pity. I just think, where's the hope? How do we find hope going forward as all of us, not just women fighting the, how can men manage their hopeful ways forward?
There's 3 women here and we feel really inspired. We all feel we want to work with something that you've released.
Yes, good.
I'd like to add to that. As a man, thank you for making a project that allows a mirror. Yeah, because that's what I think we need to see, a mirror. Do you know what I mean? And I think you achieved that. All of you guys achieved that really well. Could you put your hands together, please, for Charlotte Vincent?